Well, thank you so much for the introduction. As Mikkel mentioned, I'm Philip Lujan. I'm the extension plant pathologist. And so I will be covering cover crops and also talk a little bit about their potential diseases that we can consider or should consider. And so the outline here, I tend to give outlines in my presentations, and so we'll do cover crop basics, go more into cover crops specifically for New Mexico, and then talk about plant disease basics and get us up to speed with that, and then finally end the presentation with some of the potential diseases that some of these cover crops can have. All right, so we'll get right to it. What is a cover crop? There's a few definitions for this, and so plants that are grown between cash crop cycles, planted in the absence of a normal crop, or grown primarily to add organic matter and nutrients to the soil. What they are not is they're not harvested or partially harvested. And so if we're using a cover crop, these are sort of the general definitions for those. Now, what is the purpose of a cover crop? They have numerous benefits for us, and so some of them, they can provide protection to the soil from water and wind erosion. They can break soil compaction with the amount of roots that they can make. They can supply nitrogen and nutrients to the soil, and they can also help suppress weeds and plant diseases. So they have a lot of good benefits for planting cover crops. And so we'll sort of go through each of these in a little bit more detail. So how can cover crops help with erosion control? So the surface covers reduce the ability of wind, which we get a lot of in the spring, and water to move the soil by shielding the soil surface. And so the cover crops can bind the soil together and hold it in place, which you can see on this picture on the bottom picture. You get that nice soil there that's built and held together with that root structure, and so it doesn't allow the wind and the water to sort of wash it out and move that soil around. Crops slow the wind velocity or runoff velocity, and also improves the soil's capacity to absorb water as well. Cover crops and organic matter. So just adding organic matter, it really improves the nutrient supply of the soil. And so when you're growing cover crops, that increases and incorporates the soil biological activities, improves the soil structure, and improves the water holding capacity again. And so you could see this little diagram here without cover crops, that water just percolates and leaches right through the soil. However, when you have cover crops planted, you get, that organic matter being built, and it allows, those air pockets and the ability for water to sort of stay within that soil and not really percolate or leach down and we're not losing that really beneficial water. And so, with those cover crops and that root structure, it really keeps that water in, where it should belong into the soil and for our crops as well. So all right, so for soil compaction alleviation, compaction occurs when the soil is too dense. Those layers are really tightly packed together. It doesn't, no water or nutrients can sort of reach that area. And good soil, it can affect root growth and water movement. And then it can also affect plant growth, right? So if the soil is too compact, those roots aren't able to spread, and the roots sort of tend to stay in one area, and so you get really small compacted plants, and they're not able to grow well because they don't have enough root structure. to grow healthy and to produce for us. And so cover crops allow for, breaking of that soil compaction, generates more porous, loose layers of soil. And so it allows those roots to sort of spread out and able to get that water and those nutrients for a nice healthy stand. Cover crops again can also provide nitrogen through nitrogen fixation. And so good examples of this are your legume family, which are like alfalfa, clovers, or beans are sort of the poster child for nitrogen fixation. And so the bacteria that makes the nitrate in the roots with the plants are called rhizobium. And so this first picture on the top, you can see those little sort of balls on the roots, and those are nodules, what we call, and that's called rhizobium. And so the nitrogen comes from the air and from the soil, and it's sort of a give and take relationship. So that's why I put that there. The plants supply that bacteria or the rhizobium with simple sugars. So it, through photosynthesis, provides those products to the bacteria. And then that bacteria gives the nitrogen to the plants. And so it's sort of that nice cycle um, that happens and that happens with legumes. And so, this nitrogen, these plants can fix up to about 270 pounds per acre of nitrogen within a year. So it's not a little amount. It's a fairly, sizable production of nitrogen throughout the year. Legumes can also be planted as cover crops, and so we'll talk more specific types of cover crops um, in in a few slides later. And then those can be worked back into the soil and provide nitrogen for that following cash crop. And so cover crops and the nutrient supply. As the cover crop grows, they are also taking up nutrients. So they're not just giving, free nutrients to the soil. They're also, when they're growing, they need those nutrients to establish themselves, to grow. But then later on, these nutrients will be released when the plants are terminated, right? So we're going to terminate those cover crops. We're going to incorporate it back into the soil. And so here are some examples of the types of legumes and the amount of nitrogen, potassium, and um, uh, phosphorus that's applied back into the soil. And so if you look at these, cowpeas, lab guar, and a lot of the tepiary beans or mung beans, you can see that the amount of nitrogen, these are in pounds per acre, that these legumes are providing back into the soil. And so the same thing with phosphorus and potassium as well. Some of them, they're listed, the mung bean a little bit less, whereas the cowpea, different varieties of cowpea provide better amounts of nitrogen and potassium back into the soil. And then moving on to weed and disease suppression. So cover crops are really great at, providing suppression for weed growth and disease management as well. They do this because they can establish a really thick stand, and it prevents most of the germinated weed seeds from even completing their life cycle and reproducing. So it literally just smothers them out. And so you can see this photo here on the university by Dr. Idobu, who's our main cover crop person and soil health expert. He plants these cover crops, and you can see that in this area there's really not any weeds germinating. It can increase the amount of beneficial insects as well that is feeding on weed seeds. Some of the cover crops, like mustards and other things like that, they provide chemicals, which are natural toxins, and they can inhibit the growth or the germination of some of these weed seeds as well. Um, like I mentioned before, the mustards or the brassicas, like forage radish, They contain those glucosinolates, and those can also suppress nematodes. But we're also looking at plant pathogens, and some of these plant pathogens they sort of develop these overwintering structures, and they're able to survive year on and in the soil because of these overwintering structures. And so some of our plant pathologists here on campus are using mustards, growing them out as a cover crop, and then tilling them into the soil. And once they produce those glucosinolates, when mixed with water, it really affects those overwintering structures from those pathogens. And you see the the cash crops are doing much better because they're not affected by as many plant pathogens that are in the soil. And so to classify cover crops, there's three main ways. The first way is the way the cover crop is used, whether it's like a cash crop, green manure, or a living mulch. The other is sort of breaking it down into the type of crop planted, whether it's a grass, whether it's a brassica, or whether it's a legume. And then the most common way that we sort of classify cover crops is just generally when they're planted, either summer or winter. And so I'll use this summer and winter method because this is, the most common way that we do this. And so winter cover crops, they're planted in late summer or in the fall. They provide good ground cover during the late fall, into the winter and into the early spring. However, winter covers, they must be cold tolerant crops, right? Because if you plant something that doesn't have that cold tolerance, then they're just going to die when you get that freeze or that cold temperatures. And it's not really a good cover crop, winter cover crop because of that. So it's very important that, you do see on either on the label and the seed tags that they're cold tolerant. Critical to plant on time before the temperature becomes too low, because then those seeds won't be able to germinate and you won't get a nice thick stand. Winter hardy crops, some examples that for around here is triticale. Again, that's the hybrid of wheat and rye. Hairy vetch is another good example, as well as cereal rye. And some examples of cool season legumes can be, different types of clovers, vetches, medics, as well as field peas. And so the next summer or warm season cover crops, and this is normally planted in the summer as a nice green manure. It can provide an opportunity for a crop rotation. They do help a good amount in improving fairly poor soils, meaning not enough nutrients in the soil or really compact soils. They provide nitrogen for the following winter cash crop. And then there's a whole bunch of different types of species that can be used as summer cover crops. And so some of the examples that I'll talk about a little later are cowpeas, Cispania, as well as guar. All right, so you need deciding what type of cover crop. There's not sort of a one cover crop fits all solution. You really need to sort of think about what your goal is. Is it to increase nitrogen, to increase the amount of organic matter in your soils? Maybe you have too much wind or too much wind erosion or water erosion. Or your soils, there's areas where it's really compact and nothing can really grow there. So first off, think, what is your goal? The next one, once you decide what that is, think about what type of cover crop options are available for you. Is it a summer? Is it a winter? What do you have on hand, or what's available and what can be purchased right now? Sometimes there are seeds that are not available, or maybe it's just not the right time of season to plant that. So again, you need to know when the seeding time is. Is it going to be in spring? Is it going to be a fall? And then what are your management options or practices for your own fields or your own production system? Are you a no-till? Are you a conventional? Or is it strictly organic? Is it a mix? You know, or are there other important details to know, right? Do you have the correct planting equipment? Do you have the manpower? Do you have, different, waterings? And so there's a lot of things that goes into deciding the correct type of cover crop. You just don't necessarily just grab something and plant it out there because maybe it's not the right fit for your production system or the right fit for your growing area or even the correct time to seed. And so here's a table with some popular and pretty useful choices of cover crops for New Mexico. And so we'll discuss these in a little bit more detail in further slides. But here's a good sort of table for you to take home. They have, the overwinter ability, the amount of biomass that's produced, and the type of soil structure improvement. And then as well as a few comments as well. So you can see the annual ryegrass, it doesn't have the ability to overwinter. And so maybe that's not a good choice for your fall cover crop. The same thing for buckwheat. And then if you're wanting a good, thick amount of biomass, maybe the sweet clover would be a good choice for you, or winter wheat as well. And then if you want to improve your soil structure, you can go with the annual ryegrass because it makes really dense root systems and helps with that. And on this other side where it says comments, their general overall annual ryegrass is a fairly easy crop to establish. Winter wheat requires a fertile soil, so you want to avoid wet or low pH soil. Um, Tall fescue can be persistent and it may become weed-like. So sometimes you get a volunteer tall fescue if you don't terminate it in enough time or if you allow it to go to seed. Um, so again, like buckwheat, you don't want to allow it to mature or else you'll get reseeding and then it becomes more of a weed than a cover crop. And so you'll have to battle that, for a good amount of seasons. So this is just a nice sort of table for you to take home and to look at maybe some of these examples and the types of goals that you set for your own production system. All right, so now speaking into more, you know, more specific, we'll go into some of these cool season cover crops and then back to the spring or the summer cover crop. So these cool season cover crops, best planted late September through November, depending on where you are within New Mexico or within the region. In some cases, you can get away with planting in early spring if you're much further north. And so some examples of those cool season cover crops, again, triticale, clover, vetch, forage or tillage radish are examples. For triticale, wheat, barley, or rye, you really want to plant these late September through November. I'm going to provide some general seeding rates. Again, it all sort of depends on your production system, but if you plant between 80 to 120 pounds per acre, generally that's a good start. If you do that, triticale and these others provide excellent amounts of biomass. They can smother out weeds, so they have good weed suppression. You can interplant these with peas, vetch, and clovers, but again, you don't want to let them go to seed because they can become a weed. So their growth, they have upright growth between 3 to 5 feet. They're really good with heat and drought tolerant. Um, if you have a shady area, maybe this is also a good choice for you because they have shade tolerance as well as flood tolerance. If your soils aren't that fertile, they're also a good choice. Again, it is best to terminate when the plants are small. If they start, seeding and you develop heads, um, it can become a weed. So you want to terminate at least 2 weeks before you're planting. The next one is Austrian winter pea. Again, that seeding rate between 50 to 80 pounds per acre. September to November again. This does have a more of a climbing or a prostrate, so sort of a spreading out growth between 2 to 4 feet. This this pea fixes nitrogen fairly quickly, so it can provide up to 90 to 150 pounds of nitrogen per acre. It's really good at building soils, is a weed fighter as well. It provides excellent biomass. It's also pretty good for grazing. And then the flowers make a great beneficial insect habitat. And it can also work as mixed cover crops, can be mixed with grasses or other legumes and brassicas as well. The next one we'll talk about is annual ryegrass. The other name for that is also Italian ryegrass. And so you can plant this between August and October at a seeding rate of about 20 to 30 pounds per acre. This can produce really quickly, so it can, produce quick cover in about 4 to 6 weeks. So it germinates and establishes itself right away within a month and a half. Because it's so thick and it grows really quick. It has good great weed suppression. You can interplant this with some legumes like the pea that I mentioned before. You may need a mow if it grows too fast for the legume because it can sort of shade it out and the legumes won't be able to grow. It does tolerate shading, but this one, because it grows so fast and establishes really quickly, it can be difficult to control if it goes to seed. So you need to be pretty careful with this one if you start seeing seed heads develop. The next one is clover. You want to plant this in late September to early October. Really, the seeding rate, it depends on the type because there's so many different types of clover. Again, just sort of look at that seed packet. Um, this is great for nitrogen fixation. It does provide a nice beneficial insect habitat. Many of the clovers can be used as forage, and it can be difficult to establish on those really clay cracking soils. And so this one, if you do have that clay soil, that really hard pan soil, maybe clover is not the correct selection for you. Hairy vetch is also a really great cover crop. Um, you can seed this about 20 to 25 pounds per acre. It's great. You can see on this bottom picture here, it's making that rhizobium, those nodules. So it's a really great nitrogen fixer. This one also a beneficial insect habitat. It's cold tolerant and it does provide a good amount of biomass as well. And then the next one, the final one for our cold season cover crop is forage radish. You can see this between 8 to 12 pounds per acre. So you can see up here on the top pictures, this top right-hand picture, it can break soil compaction. It can break that soil layer. That radish can penetrate right through, and you can even see it leaves these holes after a winter kill on the bottom here. That's how strong these radishes are, and it can break that compact soil. So if you have really hard compact soils, maybe this would be a nice cover crop for you to start growing and sort of breaking up those compact layers of soil. Provides excellent biomass and good for erosion control as well. All right, so now moving on to warm season cover crops. And so these are generally planted in New Mexico between March and July, from cowpeas to buckwheat to Sesbania. And so we'll cover each of these in a little bit more detail. So the first one is cowpeas, again, plant between March and July. A good seeding rate in general is about 40 to 50 pounds per acre. These are really great at nitrogen fixation, so about 150 pounds of nitrogen per acre it provides. Because it grows a good biomass, it's excellent for weed suppression. It's pretty easy to manage as well, so doesn't take too much effort for this one. It can grow in poor soils and sandy and clay soils. Um, it can pretty much grow anywhere. It can, if you do have a nematode populations that are in the soil and you've had that diagnosed, you can grow these and it can reduce some of those nematode populations. The next one is lab, or another name for it is hyacinth bean. Again, plant March through July, seeding rate between 20 pounds per acre. This one also fixes nitrogen really well because it is a bean. Excellent weed suppression. Again, this one's pretty easy to manage as well in your alkaline or clay soils. This is very drought tolerant, but you want to beware if you do have nematodes. So unlike the cowpea before, hyacinth bean is really susceptible to nematodes, and so that can be an issue if you do have soils infested with nematodes. The next one is buckwheat, seeding rate between 50 to 60 pounds per acre. This one can grow really quickly, so it establishes fairly quick. Excellent forage for poultry, but this one is toxic to horses. So if you do have horses on your property and your fields, I would suggest not to plant this because it can be fairly toxic to horses. It will not establish well if there are, if the soil-borne disease pressure is high. They're fairly susceptible to a lot of the soil-borne diseases that we have here in New Mexico. Buckwheat can also harbor insect pests, including lygus bugs, as well as other root lesion nematodes. So this one is maybe not the greatest if you have disease issues or insect issues or nematodes or horses. So there's a lot of ifs for buckwheat when you're thinking about planting this as a cover crop. Sorghum Sudan, seeding rate between 30 to 40 pounds per acre, provides excellent biomass. It's excellent for forage or hay. This one, because of the root structure and the amount of roots that it produces, it can help improve your soil structures. Very good at weed suppression. You can see here in the picture, you can see that amount of biomass that it makes. So it just outcompetes those weeds. But this one, after you mow it and terminate it, it can regrow. So this has some potential for becoming a weed when you don't want it to be. The next one is Sesbania. The seeding rate with this one is between 40 to 50 pounds per acre. It has a very, very high biomass. You can see in Dr. Ido's cover crop trial here in Las Cruces, just full of Sesbania. You can just see, green biomass all over the place. So about 12.7 tons per acre it can make. It's a really great nitrogen fixer. You see the rhizobium, those little nodules on the bottom picture. It's excellent for weed suppression. Again, it can outcompete those weeds. It's fairly easy to manage in both sandy and clay soils. All right, so now moving on to maybe some cover crop cocktail or cover crop mixes that have become fairly um, prevalent around here. And so, cover crop mixes, they provide an insurance against cover crop failure, especially if one species, doesn't establish itself well, the others in the mix can potentially survive. And so, a good example, Dr. Idowu mentioned that he planted 4 different species from triticale, barley, Austrian winter pea, and radish. And 2 of them, the barley and the radish, failed because of irrigation problems. But still, because they had that mix, the other two, the winter pea and the triticale, they had a strong performance and they established well. So again, if you're able to do this, if you want to go with the mix, you can see what establishes well, what doesn't, and sort of maybe if you're new into the cover crop you know game, I guess, you can do these mixes, see which establishes well, and then sort of tailor your program based off of that. Can provide multiple benefits from different species in the mix. Multiple goals. So if you want to add organic matter, break up some of the soil compaction and add nitrogen, maybe you can mix some of these different types of cover crop seeds all together, and you can sort of hit each of these goals if they all establish well. And it can also enhance the microbial diversity as well, right? Because there's different microbes associated with the different crops, and you'll get a lot of that genetic diversity within the soils that way. And here, moving on to sort of the cover crop chart, I think this is a really neat sort of um, chart that the USDA provides. So if you Google USDA cover crop chart, the sort of the latest version is in 2023. It goes from cool season, warm season. It breaks it different grasses, broadleaves, and legumes. It also tells you, the amount of relative water use based off of the droplets, the types of growth architecture, plant architecture, as well as the growth cycle, if it's an annual, perennial, biannual. So this is a really neat little sort of a good reference chart for you to take a look at. There are some limitations, as I mentioned before, of cover crops. So really, management of the cover crops is the key to success. The cost of the seed and application needs to be justified. If you're, spending too much money on cover crops, maybe it's not worth your resources to be doing that if you're not getting, the added benefit, and especially if it's affecting your cash crop as well. Water consumption of the cover crops may reduce the soil moisture and also affect the following cash crops because of the lack of available soil moisture for them. It can also reduce the soil temperature and cause slow growth in cooler regions. Does the nutrient value exceed the cost of cover crop production, right? Is your cover crop taking too much from the soil and not, maybe your incorporation isn't as optimized as it should be, or they're not making the amount of nutrients, and they're not really putting it back into the soil, and it's sort of a net loss versus a net gain. So you need to think about those as well. And as I mentioned before, on some of these, they can harbor some insects and diseases as well that affect those surrounding plants and vegetation and your cash crops. So there are some limitations. It's not just, you plant it, you get all these positive benefits from it. There's also sort of those limitations that you need to think about. And so being a plant pathologist, that's something that always is on the back of my mind is, you know, what are the limitations and some of the diseases that can potentially be within these cover crops. And so we're going to move from general cover crops, when they're planted, how they grow, to more of the maybe what are the potential diseases and things that we need to look out for if we are planting some of these cover crops. And so the next half or the next, quarter of the talk will be about plant diseases. And so moving on to plant disease basics, there's many different, living and non-living factors that can affect your cover crops or plants in general. And so some of those living things can be fungi, viruses, nematodes, insects, and weeds. And so those biotic things can spread from plant to plant. So if we are growing a cover crop, they can go from your cover crop to your cash crop, and that's something that we don't want to happen. Some of the abiotic things, that we also need to think about when trying to establish both cover crops and cash crops are, those non-living things like temperature extremes, those hot temperatures, or those really cold temperatures, or even the temperature fluctuations that sometimes we see here in New Mexico, from it being very hot to really cool and then back to hot again. That can play sort of a big role on how your plants can thrive. And so a plant pathologist loves to talk about the plant disease triangle. So when we think about diseases and how they establish and how they affect your crops, you need to have three specific things that all work together. You need to have that pathogen that's either present in the soil or in the air. You need to have a susceptible host, like maybe a susceptible cultivar or a susceptible crop to that pathogen. And if you do have that pathogen present, that susceptible host, you need to have that favorable environment for the pathogen to survive and to infect that host crop. And so that favorable environment is usually after, an irrigation event or a rain event. You get some humidity, some warm temperatures. We start to see a lot of plant diseases occurring in the spring, after our monsoon season, as well as in the fall when it's a little bit, once it's not over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 80, 85 degrees is probably the good time for pathogens to sort of infect your host plants. And so we see a bunch of diseases occurring again in the spring as well as in the early fall. And so for disease management, the key to this is prevention. So well-managed plants equals healthy plants. I always like to sort of talk about a healthy human or a healthy individual. If you're getting enough exercise, eating well, treating, your body well, then you can fend off a lot of these common diseases or viruses that are around with your immune system. However, if you don't eat well, if you don't get enough exercise, if you're more sedentary, then you typically see more infections occurring with those individuals. And so the same thing with your plants. If you give them enough water, um, if you provide them with enough nutrients, they have their own immune systems, and they're able to fend off some of these diseases that are commonly found in the soils or in the air. And so the most effective management programs is to incorporate integrated disease management programs. And so that includes physical, whether it's pruning, cultural practices such as the proper irrigation and plant selection, as well as biological amendments, as well as chemical practices as well. But first, accurate identification of the disease or the pathogen is essential for successful management. If you start to see, leaf spots occurring, you don't immediately grab your pesticide and start spraying just because there's a spot on there. Same thing for humans, right? We don't immediately grab our antibiotics. If we have just, maybe if someone's sneezing, you don't take an antibiotic because of that. It could be just a simple cold. It can be just allergies, things like that. So the same thing with plant diseases. We need to identify them before and then treat them, with maybe it's just more irrigation or selective pruning, things like that. And so for that, you want to really test, for a plant disease. You don't want to guess. And so we have here at NMSU, we have the Plant Diagnostic Clinic, and there's a whole team of us of specialists. We have a weed specialist who's our co-director for the plant clinic, Dr. Leslie Beck. I'm the other co-director. I'm the plant pathologist. Our plant diagnostician, Dr. Dura, she's here also to help us with plant diseases and identifying, whether it's a fungus, a bacteria, or a virus. We have our team of entomologists like Dr. King and Dr. Pierce. We even have a horticulturist as well, Dr. Thompson, and she can provide, either IDs or the correct type of plants to plant for your growing zone, and a nematologist in Jackie Beecham as well for those nematode issues. And so some of the services that we provided, we are an integrated plant clinic, meaning we can handle plant diseases, we identify those, but we can also try to identify and work with the growers on some of the abiotic issues. Maybe you're having soil issues, or maybe the growing zone is not appropriate for that type of plant or tree. We can also do arthropod or insect identification. So if you're not sure what that insect is, collect it, send it down to us, and our team of entomologists will identify it as well as provide management strategies for that. And then we have plant and weed identifications as well. So if you're not sure what that plant or that weed is, snap a picture, send it to us, or collect the weed, send it down to us as well, and we can identify that. All right, so now moving on to those specific plant diseases and those cover crops that I mentioned before. And so the first one that we mentioned, again, that warm season crop one was triticale. And so it's susceptible to a few fungal and viral diseases. And so for the next slides, I put if it's susceptible to a fungus or a virus or a bacteria, I'm going to list those here in sort of a general list. And the ones that are in bold are the ones that we'll talk about in a little bit more detail, because sometimes we see those more often. And so the first one that we're going to sort of highlight is Fusarium head blight. This is caused by a Fusarium species. So this is a fungus being the predominant species. The favorable conditions for infection with this pathogen is warm and wet with high humidity. Some of the symptoms of infection, so if you're planting triticale as a cover crop and you start to see, bleach spikelets or shrunken kernels and fungal growth on the affected heads, like this picture here, maybe you want to submit a sample to us and we'll identify it. And so management strategies, there are resistant varieties, crop rotation. You don't want to plant this triticale after corn, and there are fungicides. But again, we really want to limit the amount of fungicides and even the amount of inputs that we need for our cover crops, because then it won't be worth it to establish those cover crops with our for our cash crops. The next one for triticale is the Triticum mosaic virus. This is transmitted by wheat curl mites. And so there's a co-infection that often occurs with wheat streak mosaic virus. And so some of the symptoms that you can see up on this picture here is yellowing and streaking, as well as mottling and stunting. And so here's on this first sort of block is a healthy tissue, but then you start to see these yellowing little mosaic patterns. And then here's our mock plant, meaning plant with no virus in it. And then to the right of that is one that's infected with virus. And so you can see it's a little bit more stunted than one that's not. And here's the wheat curl mite, the one that transmit the virus. So it's very small. It's hard to see with your naked eye. And so if you start to see yellowing and streaking as well as stunting plants, maybe you want to submit this sample for virus testing. The next one is Austrian winter pea, susceptible to a few fungal, nematode, and viral diseases. We'll talk about powdery mildew as well as root knot nematode. And so powdery mildew, it's caused by the fungus Erysipeae. Favorable conditions, like most of the plant pathogens, warm, dry weather with a cool, dewy morning. Symptoms and signs of infection, like on this picture here, you get that white, powdery fungal growth on the leaves, as well as it can happen on the stems and the pods. If you get a lot of it, the leaves can start yellowing and the leaves can also fall off because of it. For management, resistant varieties, improving maybe air circulation as well as field sanitation. So if you do have powdery mildew, you want to get rid of all of that fallen leaf matter on your fields because it can establish year after year. The next one is root knot nematode caused by the nematode Meloidogyne. Some of the symptoms above ground, you can get stunted growth, yellowing of the leaves, as well as reduced yields. Below ground, if you pull up your plants of your winter peas, you can see these galls or knots that are developed on the roots from those adult nematodes. For management, resistant varieties, crop rotation, improving soil health and drainage, so adding organic matter, as well as tilling and sanitation as well. Annual ryegrass, susceptible mostly to fungal diseases. Gray leaf spot and anthracnose are the two that we'll highlight. Gray leaf spot, again, caused by the fungus, Pyraculurea. I always have a hard time saying that. Favorable conditions for infection, high temperatures, about 82 to 90, a lot of leaf moisture, a bunch of nitrogen. So if you add nitrogen, quick acting nitrogen, that helps the pathogen grow, and plant stress as well. So some of the symptoms that you can see, like on this bottom picture here, get this blue-gray cast, yellow appearance. The leaves can develop lesions and patches, and you can get leaf death. And so cultural practices are management strategies, like irrigation. You want to water deeply to increase that root growth, but infrequently. So if you water just a little bit every day, you're going to start to select for some this fungus. Again, avoid excessive or quick release fertilizer because that pathogen feeds on that nitrogen. Improve air circulation as well. The next one is anthracnose, caused by the fungus Calototricum. It develops, between 70 to 90 degrees, as well as in wet conditions. Some of the symptoms that you can see are foliar blight, meaning the leaves they get yellow to brown lesions starting to develop on them. But you can also get rotting on the basal parts of the plant near the base of the plants. Cultural practices such as irrigation, again, water deeply but infrequently, and again, also avoid those excess or quick release fertilizers. Clover, susceptible to some viruses and fungal diseases. For viruses, alfalfa mosaic, and for fungal fusarium root rot. The virus is transmitted by aphids, but it can also be on the seeds themselves or through mechanical spread. Some of the symptoms are leaf mosaic, as the name implies, necrosis, deformed plants, and plant death. And so you can see on that bottom picture, pretty messed up plant. Management, you want to use certified virus-free seed, weed control for your aphids because those are the ones that are transmitting the virus, and resistant varieties. And if you do see a plant looking like this, you want to remove that infected plant because those aphids can feed off of those infected plants and move to healthy plants and infect that way. Fusarium root rot is caused by the fungus Fusarium species. Favorable conditions is plant stress as well as insect damage. It allows that pathogen to enter pretty quickly and easily. Some of the symptoms of infection can be stunted growth, wilting, and root and crown discoloration, which you're seeing on this picture. For management, you want to promote plant vigor, crop rotation, good insect control, and plant good certified seed as well. For hairy vetch, one to highlight is a fungal infection called Sclerotinia stem rot, and it's caused by the fungus Sclerotinia sclerosum. Favorable conditions for this for infection is cool, wet conditions. Some of the symptom and signs you might see on hairy vetch is wilting. You can get some white mycelium on the stems, like we're seeing on this bottom picture there, as well as black sclerotia, which is on the top that look like almost mouse droppings. These are the tightly wound mycelium that can survive in the soil for 20 plus years until you get that susceptible host. To manage this disease, air circulation, sanitation, irrigation management, as well as crop rotation. Forage radish, susceptible to both verticillium wilt as well as bacterial soft rot. And so for verticillium wilt, it's caused by the fungus Verticillium dahliae. Favorable conditions between 64 and 90, so it has a pretty wide temperature range. Can be spread through the soil, wind, and water. Some of the symptoms of infection, like this picture here in this middle section, wilting of the lower leaves, stunting of the plant. You get this dark brown discoloration around and in the vascular system. So if you pull that plant up, you open the vascular system up, you'll see a dark brown compared to a healthy white tissue. And so for management, crop rotation, and just destroy infected material for this disease. The bacterial soft rot caused by a couple of bacterium, Pectobacterium as well as a Pseudomonas. With most bacterial infections, prolonged moisture, excessive rain or irrigation, and mild and humid temperatures are favorable conditions for an infection. Water-soaked tissue for symptoms, rotted tissue. If you're passing it, you can almost smell that foul odor as well as see the leaves wilt themselves. For management, sanitation, manage humidity. So if you're planting very dense crop, maybe sort of remove some of that material, allow that air to pass through, and then just optimize plant health. For cowpeas, Cercospora and cowpea mosaic are the two that we'll highlight next. The first one, Cercospora leaf spot, caused by the fungus Cercospora canescens, spread by wind and wind-blown spores. Some of the symptoms that we see are those leaf spots, yellow halo develop around it, powdery appearance, as well as leaf defoliation if it gets too many of those leaf spots. To manage this, resistant varieties, sanitation. So if you see those leaves on the ground, remove those. Crop rotation and avoiding overhead irrigation because you can spread those spores fairly quickly and easily that way. Cowpea mosaic virus is transmitted by leaf-feeding beetles, seed or mechanical transmission, so through tools as well. Some of the symptoms, leaf mosaic, you get these light and green patterns, which you see on this bottom picture. The leaf area reduction as well as plant stunting. For management, plants good certified seed. You want to manage those beetle populations because those are the ones that are spreading the virus, and good field sanitation practices as well. For Lab bean mosaic virus is one that we'll highlight. The first, that virus is transmitted by a whitefly vector. Some of the symptoms you can see on that is you get yellow mosaic patches, stunted growth, and reduced yields. Management for this is just whitefly management, planting resistant varieties, and removing those infected plants. For buckwheat, there are a couple of diseases that we'll highlight. The first one being Rhizoctonia root rot, caused by the fungus Rhizoctonia solani. The disease is favored by intermediate soil moisture and most active in warm soil temperatures. And so if you pull up the root system, you can see some of the root and stem lesions developing. You can get root girdling, which we see on this bottom picture here. So it doesn't allow water and nutrients to move up to the plants. So you get those yellow leaves, stunting and wilted plants. There are fungicide treated seed, crop rotation, improve your soil drainage, and do not over fertilize for management. Curly top virus is another one for buckwheat. Can be transmitted by the beet leaf hopper. Some of the symptoms are stunting plants, leaf chlorosis or yellowing, small shriveled leaves, and then plant death. And so for this one, sanitation, managing your weeds because those beet leaf hoppers overwinter on some weeds like London Rocket and flicksweed. You can remove infected plants and then shading because leaf hoppers prefer those sunny areas. And so if you want to shade a little bit of your plants, they're not as, as nice, I guess, for the leaf hoppers to feed off of. Sorghum in Sudan, bacterial leaf stripe is a bacterial disease that we want to highlight for this one. It's caused by Burkholderia. High humidity, prolonged leaf wetness, as well as the presence of infected residue from previous crops are those favorable conditions. Symptoms of infection is elongated, narrow, yellow to brown lesions develop, and you get irregular margins of those lesions developing. There are resistant hybrids, crop rotation, sanitation, as well as seed treatment for this disease. For Cisbania, viral disease that we'll highlight is Cisbania mosaic virus. And this is transmitted by mechanical transmission or through sap. So if you're rubbing, a plant, if you're walking right by it, some sap gets on you, you can transmit it that way. Some of the symptoms include mosaic symptoms, which you can sort of see on this picture here between non-infected Cisbania and infected Cisbania. Stunted growth and leaf deformation. Management, really just prevention. There's not really a cure for most of the viruses. Use certified seed as well as careful handling and destroying infected plants. All right, so that was sort of a quick and dirty of the potential plant diseases of cover crops. But again, we're planting cover crops because there's really there we're trying to reduce the amount of disease that's present, incorporate, all of those beneficial um, nutrients that cover crops make. So, we don't most often we don't really see cover crops being, a bunch having a bunch of diseases and coming through the plant clinic. So, these are all potential diseases that can occur. And so field scouting, is very important if you're planning to do cover crops or having them in your production system already. It's always good to scout and making sure, there's no diseases developing on those cover crops because that can be, those can be sort of damaging to your cash crops as well. So again, think about the disease triangle. The pathogens are usually going to be present within the soils themselves. We can find pathogens in any type of soil. If we go outside right now, grab some soil, we can identify a good amount of pathogens that are in that soil. So those are going to be there. We can sort of think about planting, the host. So if we identify that pathogen, maybe there are some tolerant or resistant varieties of crops or cultivars that we can plant to reduce your disease. And then finally, we can alter that favorable environment for those pathogens to stop, growing so prevalent, and we can reduce the amount of disease from occurring that way as well. Again, disease management, prevention, healthy plants equals well-managed plants. And so if you have any questions about the presentation or plant disease problems in general, or you want to know more information about the plant diagnostic clinic and how to sample or where to send it to, we have our website, plantclinic.nmsu.edu, or you can just email me. That's the preferred method. My email address is there. I have a statewide appointment, so I'm sort of traveling all the time. So if you do want to talk on the phone, can be difficult at times. Leave a voicemail. Once I'm back in the office, I will get to those, but the email I can answer while I'm on the road as well. I know that was a lot of material, so I'll stop sharing. If we have a little bit of time for questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Thanks, Luan. That was a lot of great information actually. So, I'll open this up for the audience tonight. If you guys have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself. I had a question. You know, we are, in a windy, dry, somewhat erosion prone type area. Is there like a cover crop that has like a strong root system that can quickly like protect itself against wind erosion?
Yeah, I think a really good option for that would either be a triticale or an annual ryegrass because it does produce a good amount of root material and
Mhm.
it grows fairly high, so both it protects the crops from wind erosion as well as soil erosion, and so those are maybe two good options for you
Yeah.
to plant.
And would you consider those species like a best starter cover crop for like beginners like myself?
Yes, yeah, because they're fairly easy to put out there and they don't require a whole lot of effort. And
Yeah.
so that would be a good crop to establish um, for beginners, I guess. And so
Yeah.
just avoid, you want to avoid if you're using this as a cover crop, just once they start going to seeding, you want to get terminate those. So um, so
And
because they can establish so quickly, they can become weedy.
okay. And does the cover crops that you just mentioned, do they also provide a forage for like livestock? I know you mentioned that there's one type of cover crop that horses shouldn't be tolerated. It's in that range if it's, you're implementing that into the cover crop.
Yes, I believe that was buckwheat, and so you don't want buckwheat if you do have horses, because that can be pretty bad for horses if they do eat that. Um,
Okay.
but yes, the triticale and the ryegrass can be forage material.
So when do you think is the best planting window in our area for like a successful establishment?
Um, if you're more north, I would say early August, especially if you're going for um a more cool season crop.
Hmm.
And so that early August, maybe into early September would be a good window to start seeding and planting those. For the warm season, I would say maybe June, especially up north. That would May, June would be a good window for those warm season cover crops.
Mandarin. Okay. All right. Um, and one more question for me. So, so these two species, do I need to amend my soil before planting the cover crop, or can I just like put the seeds in there?
Yeah, I think cover crops do well in general. They don't need a whole bunch of pre-planting
Mhm.
pre-planting sort of if you just put out your seed, most of them are really great at starting themselves, and so you don't need a whole lot of effort pre-plant, which is good.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. So I'll go ahead and stop talking. And while some of you are thinking of the questions, I am going to release our cover crop poll. So if you guys just take a couple minutes, it just takes 1 or 2 minutes to complete the whole polls. So if you don't mind completing that, I would greatly appreciate it. In the meantime, if you guys want to insert your questions in the chat box, feel free. If not, then you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, hello.
Hello. Oh,
My name is Feline Tyler, and I have a question. You mentioned buckwheat are not good for the horses. In our area, we have a lot of elks and deers. How is that? Would that hurt them if they ate that?
Ooh, I am not exactly sure, but that I can ask our animal extension specialist and get back to you on that. I don't want to say it doesn't, and then that can be a whole issue that way. And so I would be cautious with that, but I will put that on my things to do. I will get with them, and then I can if you want to send me privately an email or send your information that way, I can answer that question for you.
Okay. Another question. In our area, we live in a drought dry area. If we were to plant a cover crop, do we have to irrigate it? Do we have to water that cover crop before winter, or are we just depending on the winter?
Yeah, you do have to water it at the beginning so it can at least establish itself. Um, so once it gets established, a good watering, it'll develop those root structures, and then you won't have to really irrigate it that much anymore. And so, a good establishment at the beginning, a good watering, and then you let those seeds germinate and grow, and they should take care of themselves. And so that's a good thing about the cover crops.
Okay. One more question. I'm
Mhm.
sorry.
Sure.
Last year we planted some cover crops. but we didn't get enough moisture. Although we irrigated, it didn't get high enough. The other thing we encountered is a lot of rodents, prairie dogs. They just ate everything that was in there, the
Sure.
crows and everything else like that. How do we prevent our rodents that eats our cover grass that we have?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and something that, when you're growing cover crops, that's something you have to sort of deal with and expect. Um, one thing that I like to suggest is, if there's an area where, if there's some cover crop that you're able to sort of sacrifice on one end, you can have them sort of focus on that while you're growing other things around, or just more trapping. I mean, those are sort of the two sort of options you have for that, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Feline, for your questions. Do we have any more folks from our audience tonight that has any questions? If so, go ahead and unmute yourself.
I have one question. I know
Yes.
a lot of people are pressed for time and they like to do a lot of things all at once. So let's say you have two goals. One is decreasing soil compaction, and one is using nutrients. Would you plant two together, or are they really competitive and one will outgrow the other? What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're seeing more and more often those mixes. And so if you do have those two different goals, from that table you can sort of mix and match the best ones for you, and then you can plant those. And um, I like to do a mix and match, and those will should establish, and you don't get a whole lot of competition with cover crops, which is good.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so yeah, those mixes generally do very well with establishment.
Mm. Um, I know you mentioned this. I'm not sure if I was listening. Are some of them good at? I heard some bring insects. Are some good to deter certain bugs?
um Not necessarily to deter, but to bring in beneficials.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any that sort of provide chemicals to ward off some of your insects. It's more bringing the good ones in.
Okay. One more question. In
Sure.
terms of bioengineering, are there any studies where they add uh, genetically altered nitrogen fixers to certain plants and grow them and then put them out in the field? Um, is that a topic?
I I'm sure it is with a bunch of the genetic improvements that labs have been doing, like CRISPR and things like that.
Mhm.
Um, Off the top of my head, I am not sure about, increasing the nitrogen fixation aside from like the beans and peas.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I'm sure there's somebody doing something around.
Okay. I'll check it out. I just
Yeah,
wondering off the top
that's
of your head if you
interesting.
heard anything like that. Okay.
Sure.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. Can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good evening. Hi.
Good
My
evening.
name is Lucinda Tomchi, and I have um a field, and it continually grows greasewood. I think that's what it is. Um, I'm not really sure if that's considered a noxious weed,
Ooh.
but I'm would like some advice on how to address that, because when I do pull it out, what it does is it just allows for erosion and for the water to just disperse all over, because
Uh-huh.
it's just, it doesn't have any coverage there. But I'm trying to, I really would like to know where I can get some cover crop, where I can start putting that into the soil. Do you have any resources you could share and then kind of help me address how to deal with that, with the um
With
Just-
greasewood. Yeah, that I'm unfamiliar with. I can get with our extension weed specialist, and
Mhm,
I think she would be more knowledgeable on that type of plant. And
mhm.
maybe you were mentioning trying to get rid of it and incorporate cover crops in there.
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Then I will have to get your information and I will get with her and then I can send you, what she thinks because I'm unfamiliar with that.
Okay. Yeah, it's real prominent in our area. I'm from the Four Corners, there in Tisnasbus, and
Okay.
it's in Apache County, and I did fill out the survey. But we have a lot of community members who live further upstream who have farms that have that. So I'd like to kind of,
Okay.
really provide some feedback to them on how to address that as we move.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll definitely get with her and then once she provides me that information I can get with Mikhail and then send that to you as well.
Okay. All right. I do
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Of course.
Okay. So how do I give my information?
You can either type it directly, like a direct message to me, or you can email me at
Okay.
pl11.
Okay. Can you put that in the chat box?
Yes,
Or
I will send that to everybody right now.
okay, that would be very helpful. That way I'll have it.
There you go.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I really like your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay. Well,
Hello.
thank you so much. Oh, I'm sorry. There was another question. Go ahead.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Alec from the Philippines, and I'd like to ask regarding the cover crop cocktails that you have mentioned earlier.
Hmm.
I know that I think increasing it also increases the host range for pathogens since um isn't that a major problem because when you use multiple cover crops, because you mentioned earlier as well on your presentation that there are lots of pathogens attacking the cover crops that we use. So when do you recommend doing that cover crop cocktails?
Yeah. When you're increasing that microbial diversity using those cocktails, it can actually reduce the amount of pathogens present because if you're planting the same type of cover crop or a single cover crop, you can select for that pathogen to start, overtaking that cover crop. And so when you're incorporating that microbial diversity, you're actually reducing the probability for a pathogen to occur because, you're the same sort of philosophy with crop rotation. So if you're planting the same crop year on and year after year, then you're sort of selecting for that pathogen. The same thing with using those cocktails. Think of it as a crop rotation. And so if you're doing that, you're actually potentially reducing the amount of disease that can occur on those cover crops.
Okay. So basically it's not mixing multiple cover crops. Is that correct? Is it more likely of crop rotation? Is that what you're saying
I'm
regarding?
sort of no. So if you're doing those cover crop cocktails or mixes, I'm
Mhm.
sort of relating it to like crop rotation. So you're sort of
Okay.
you're planting those different mixes of cover crops. Um, I'm sort of relating that to crop rotation, but it's not exactly crop rotation. It's just using those different genetics, and you're reducing the ability for the pathogen to sort of select itself on that one type of host, while you have different types of crops that are growing with your cover crop mix.
Okay. I just thought that multiple cover crops can inadvertently include host for a wide range of pathogens.
That is sort of a good thing to think about, but it actually reduces the potential for it.
All right, that's good to hear. Thank
Yes.
you, Philip.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and end our Q&A for our presentation tonight. I just want to say thank you to everyone for so many questions. This really makes the whole thing worthwhile. So I really appreciate all the questions that are coming from our audience tonight. And thank you, Philip, for coming on
course.
here and sharing some of your expertise. And I'm sure that a lot of our folks tonight are taking back some good information. So, and I see some of you are filling out the poll, so thank you so much. And we'll go ahead and end our webinar presentation for tonight. Philip, you're more than welcome to stick around. We're just going to share some of our upcoming events and just talk a little bit about our conservation planning program. But you're more than happy to stay tuned, or you can go ahead and exit the Zoom.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for coming and listening. If you have any questions, there's my email. I'll be happy to email you back. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so this week we do have some in-person workshops. So we do have the agrivoltaic system coming up on the 19th, which is this Friday. And it will be our presenter is Emiliano McLean. He is the NMSU Research Science Associate out at the Agricultural Research Science Center that's located in Farmington. And he's also serving as our NSA project specialist. So if you are around in the town on the 19th of Friday, this is going to be starting at 4 p.m. If you are quite unaware of where the Agriculture Science Center, I recommend using the Google Maps because it has more of a direct pin to where the Agriculture Science Center is. But if you use the map setting that is already embedded in your iPhone, then it will have a harder time trying to find the area. Instead, you would have to zoom in and drop a pin in there, then it will take you directly there. But if you don't mind registering for this event, I greatly appreciate it. We do have some materials for folks that will be attending. They will create their own solar box, garden box that they will take home at the end. Okay, so we do have our livestock first aid training coming up this next week. This has been pretty popular of ours ever since 2023 that we introduced it. So now it's more of an ongoing thing every year. So this year is going to be our last one that we provide the livestock first aid for 2025 until the following year, 2026. You would have to find us on Facebook to see if we have anything as far as spring. But for now, this is going to be the last of our fall for 2025. So this is going to be taking place on September 26th, starting from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And our event's going to be located the first time at San Juan McGee Park. So we would have the presentation located in the poultry barn. For those of you that have registered, you will be getting a reminder as well as notifying you that you have registered, as well as how to get to the barn and where the in-person demonstration is going to be located at. So there's several barns on the McGee Fairgrounds, and so we will provide you a layout of how to get to certain barns that the classroom setting is going to be in, and as well as where the demonstration is going to take place. Okay, so next one that we have is our invasive tree management workshop that's going to be taking place on October 2nd. And this is going to be more to the invasive trees that are located in the San Juan County area, which is more of the Siberian elm trees, the Chinese elm trees. And there's another one that I'm not, it's in my head, but I can't say it. But this is going to be presented by Kevin Lombard. They actually have these trees at the Agricultural Science Center in Farmington. And this is going to be more of a hands-on, out in the field type workshop that Dr. Lombard is going to walk folks through the trees and how to manage them, because they're pretty invasive in the San Juan County area. So he just thought it would be a pretty good idea for them to come out into the field and see hands-on how to manage them properly. All right. So these are just a couple of pictures that I just wanted to show you guys as some of the past photos coming from our livestock first aid training. We did have here these two photos coming from April during the spring, when we did have some hands-on participation coming from our audience to vaccinate cattle as well as trick testing. Then back in 2023, this was the first year that we had the horse training, and not very much participation that we've gathered. We did have more people that participated in the cattle and the sheep training, but not much of the horse, so we don't have that no more. But if there is more of a high demand to have the horse implemented into the livestock first aid training, then we would reconsider that. Then this was back in spring in April, where we had brought this first time, how to prep our producers to suture external minor cut wounds. You can see some of the wound or the kits that we have here. We do have some folks on here on our webinar that actually participated in it. So I'm sure that they had some good things to say about this training. We did have some sheep participation as well, coming from Dene College, that they gathered some sheep from 2 years ago. Then this was the kit bag that we had brought for 2 years straight. And this is one of the photos. I wish the picture was a little bit better quality. We did have one producer that attended the training, and this was during sheep shearing time, and they nipped the sheep on the outer end on the leg, and they implemented the training that they were taught this past year, and they've treated that wound pretty well. So moving on, some of you have requested this. We do have a website that's operating and ongoing. So if you just want to put in your URL, nsa.nmsu.edu, it'll take you directly to this homepage that you see here. This is our homepage. It just lets you read more about who we are as a project. We do have like a quick link type pop-up right here of our Facebook. And here's all the tabs. It will look a lot different if you're tuning in from your phone. But if you just hit upcoming events in this category right here, it'll take you to the upcoming events page. So obviously these two are pretty much, done deal. But if you scroll down for another webinar, it will always say registration is required, and it says register here. If you click that link, it will take you to another page and have you registered from there. All right. So for those of you that are pretty new on here, thank you again for tuning into our webinar. It just shows how much of our, platform is outreaching a lot of different areas. And so we, as a project team, we pretty much grew from the start of 2023. So we do have our project director. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it here. He's also a professor from the New Mexico State. I myself provide the content every month, just depending on what you guys want to see more. Shirley Toe, who is our project specialist, handles our conservation planning program. Terrell Yazzie, who's also jack of all trades. He does not just conservation planning, but he also assists farmers and ranchers with developing a business plan for being part of the Farm Service Agency program. So if you have been approved and been good on your grazing updates with BIA, you're more than welcome to sign up for Farm Service Agency programs, and Terrell Yazzie is going to be your guy. Emiliana McLean, he is pretty new on our team, but we are happy to have him. I can't thank him enough. He's going to be taking over our horticulture programming. So right now we're implementing some horticulture curriculum in schools as well as hospitals. And we do have Cheryl Toast, excuse me, our project assistance that keeps us running and going on our NSA social platforms. Tiffany Toth, who is our project resource technician that goes one-on-one with all of our producers. And we all know, I've showed you that we have an operating NSA NMSU website. We do have a Facebook. So if you search us at Navajo Sustainable Agriculture Project, you'll find us, and as well as the same username for our YouTube platform. Our program is funded by the USDA Outreach and Assistance for Native Farmers and Ranchers and Veteran Farmers and Ranchers program. So at NSA, our primary goal is to support producers by providing resources that help improve their operations, both profitability and sustainability. And we collaborate a lot with our collaborative partners, which is Dene College Land Grant Office, which you see their logos on all of our flyers, our webinars, and as well as COPE, which stands for Community Outreach and Patient Empowerment. So they are a big project partners of ours too when it comes to horticulture related topics. So we have their logos on all of our platform as well. So we do really want to give them the credit. We do deliver in-person workshops and webinars tailored to producers' needs based on the feedback that we gather from each session. So some of you that are on here are quite familiar with our polls when we have concluded with our webinars, as well as in-person events where you all have pretty much gone through the training, or at the end of the workshop, you're given evaluation on the overall understanding of the training / workshop or webinar presentations, and how you describe that type of resources. Was it helpful? Was there something that we could have done differently? Or what kind of topics are you suggesting that you feel would benefit you the most? So some of the recent workshops that we have concluded from beginning of this year was a lot of livestock record keeping. And we did have our livestock first aid training that was provided back in April, and some of our sheep shearing / sheep health workshops that were pretty much a big hit during the first part of the year. And we hope to bring that type of workshop back very soon. We know that this winter we're just pertaining it to kind of the seasons right now. So right now it's just more of a maintenance type situation where you have to keep some cover crops implemented and not ready for planting unless it's different types of seeds. And not only do we provide that, but we also have food preservations that are coming up towards the end of the year, among others. So we're pretty fortunate to partner with Dene College Land Grant and NMSU CES specialists that you see a lot of their logos on our webinars and workshops as well. And, they all play a crucial role in helping us develop these agricultural resources for our producers. So another essential goal of ours is to help increase our producers' knowledge in USDA programs. Many of you are pretty much aware and familiar with NRCS and FSA, such as forage drought loss assistance, crop disaster assistance, and through our virtual resource fairs, we give USDA field offices the platform to share their program in detail so ranchers and farmers can learn how to access support that aligns with their needs of where they are and where they live. So another essential goal of ours is that we're pretty proud of is we offer a conservation planning program in collaboration with the Nate College Land Grant. So this is pretty much led by our project resource specialist, Miss Shirley Toth, as well as our resource technician, Tiffany. Work with ranchers and farmers through Eastern and Northern Navajo agencies. They help them, farmers and ranchers, build basic conservation plan. But I'll explain more of it further once we have concluded with our tonight's presentation. And lastly, I know it's already 5:30, so I'm going to get through this quickly. So lastly, we focus on increasing local fresh food production in the areas that we serve. With our gardening projects, we collaborate, like I've mentioned from the beginning, with experts from COPE, as well as DCLGO and NMSU CES specialists, like Lujan himself. You guys might have recognized some of their names from our virtual content, like Miss Palmer, who led sessions for food preservations and garden planning and water storage methods. Dr. Walker from NMSU presented on spring vegetable gardening. We did have Dr. King, who specialized in entomologists, provide what type of beneficial insects are really more, engaging with gardening and what kind of insects you should look out for. And our tonight's presentation presenter, who's going to be covering cover crops. So with overall, we're happy to share more in-person workshops tailored to gardening and crops. Simply just share with us, your feedback after the webinar, and hopefully the next couple of months, we shall see kind of a layout of what we have